Welcome to Abricot, l'atelier du désir, a space where we talk about desire, the body, connection, spirit and mind. Today I'm joined by Dr. Jim Pfaus, a Canadian neuroscientist and one of the world's leading experts on the biology of pleasure. For more than 3 decades, Jim has explored what happens in the brain when we feel desire, how molecules like dopamine, oxytocin, or opioids shape that delicate balance between wanting, connection, and release. His work reminds us that pleasure is not just chemistry, it's emotion, memory, and the living intelligence of the body. You're listening to Abricot, l'atelier du désir. Take a breath and come with us into this exploration. Hello, Jane. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm delighted to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
It's truly a pleasure and an honor to have you, and your work has inspired so many people to see desire not only as a simple drive, but as a rich emotional and relational process. I have some questions for you today because I'm very curious to see the connection between this process. So first of all, Jim, you've been studying desire for more than 3 decades. That's a lifetime of exploring what moves us. And when you look at the human brain, a very large question. What do you actually see behind the word desire?
Oh my goodness. Yes, that is a very large question because you can have desire for sex, desire for food, desire for drugs, desire for peace, desire for war. You can have desire for so many different things. And there are commonalities between all of those. When you think of desire, we tend to think of things like motivation. These are concepts. But when you put that in a brain, you have to say, well, what's being activated? And of course, when you're in a desire state, there are commonalities that are activated. The limbic system is activated. The amygdala is activated. The hypothalamus is activated. Septum is activated. But the cortex is whoppingly activated. But it's not just cortical activation. The cortex is actually saying, well, what do I desire? And it puts people in the here and now. I mean, yes, desire is kind of a future idea, the idea that I desire something now, which makes me go and get it. And that involves the activation of the mesolimbic dopamine system, for example. But what you desire is kind of in the here and now. Yeah, even though it's a future, it's a goal, it's a future event. So you're projecting not only the future based on the here and now, but also from a hierarchy. And that hierarchy is probably laid down completely biologically, right?
Yes.
But it's going to depend again on the here and now. So for example, I might want to have sex, but I might also be starving to death. So what am I going to do first? Right? And that's where the dopamine system really comes in, because it's not only, I mean, people used to think of dopamine as reward or as pleasure. It's actually attention to reward-related cues, right? So when you see something in the environment and you look out, and almost like a gestalt, things pop out from the background into the foreground. And those are the things that you are most attending to, but also quite often the things that you most desire. Yeah. So when you're, if you're hungry, you're kind of going to the refrigerator, you're thinking about food, you're looking for food, you're going to your favorite restaurant, your attention is captured by those stimuli on the outside,
Yes.
right? But when you're thinking about sex, you're not necessarily, you pass your favorite restaurant and you don't even think about it because you're thinking about something else.
Yes.
So there is a biological hierarchy of things, which oddly enough, sex is probably on the top of that hierarchy. Thank God. But, but you then have to weigh that against what you need. You're not going to die if you don't have sex. The species will die if we all don't have sex, but no individual will. But if you don't eat, you
probably
are
die.
then standing the chance of dying. So your brain, your cortex in particular, is constantly weighing that and saying, well, what do I need to do now? What do I want to do now? And the
Hmm.
needs and the wants sometimes get in the way of each other. And then you have the whole culture that you have to deal with, which is, well, can I do what I want? And can I fulfill the need?
Yeah.
And people, in many parts of the world live in places where they can't fulfill the need
Hmm.
and they can't even necessarily do what they want. So the brain has to take that and say, well, okay, under what circumstances can I do that? So it's a massive computation that happens with desire. And when I look at the brain, I see that computation. I don't see it as, oh, here's a desire.
Yeah.
I see it as, oh my God, what do I have to do now? How do I get my sex partner? How do I get my food? How do I get my thirst? How do I quench my thirst? What do I need to do that? And I see this kind of ongoing computation that the brain is doing, weighing all of these needs and all of these wants together to produce, what we become aware of as a net behavior, a net feeling, like, oh, I feel horny tonight. I feel hungry right now. I feel whatever it is that you're feeling. And that's what you respond to.
Yeah.
That's what you're consciously aware of. All that computation that goes on in all these regions, like the hypothalamus, like the limbic system, like the cortex, like even the brainstem, right? Which is really quite sensitive to increases in heart rate, right? So as you're aware of something, your heart rate goes up.
Yeah,
Now you
exactly.
can interpret that, right? If it's a sexual circumstance and you're young, for example, you might think of that as anxiety rather than as arousal.
Hmm.
And so your cortex is going to be tagging that and saying, "Oh, is this the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right place? Am I saying it the right way? Am I going after it the right way?"
Hmm.
So I don't look at this, you look at the brain and you see, oh, well, this is activated, that's activated. People have looked at brain activation with fMRI, magnetic resonance imaging,
Yeah, yeah.
in humans. I look at it in rats using a molecular marker at the level of a cell nucleus, and I can see regions of the brain that are activated. But the magic of that is that those regions all together are creating a computation that's saying, I'm going to do A before I do B.
Yeah, exactly.
And so yeah, I mean, it is a huge question. And what do you see when you see the activation of the brain? And a lot of people will see activation of the brain. I mean, even good scientists see activation of the brain and they say, oh, well, this area is activated, that must be oxytocin. Oh, this area is activated, that must be serotonin. Oh, this area is activated, that must be something else. And in fact, it could be not that. It could be a bunch of inhibition
Yeah.
that's activated, right? People will say, well, look at the nucleus accumbens. It's activated. That must be dopamine. But in fact, the neurons that are in the nucleus accumbens, the ventral striatum, which are, again, part of that attentional mechanism, are dopamine actually inhibits them
Hmm.
so that it kind of hones in the attention. Because you could attend to everything. And if you do, then you can't do anything.
Exactly.
Right? So you need that inhibition to kind of hone the attention toward the thing you're interested in or the thing you need or want, rather than all the other things you could be doing at any one time, but you're not, because now you want to watch a movie, or
Yeah.
now you want to eat, or now you want to have sex, or now you want to do something else. So you can't just look at that and say, well, that's dopamine. It must be activating attention. It is dopamine and it is activating attention, but it's doing it via inhibition of all the other things you don't need to do.
Yeah. And
You know what
and
I mean? So it's a very complex thing.
oh, it sure it is. And you mentioned something about inhibition. I love that image of that describes that you describe that desire is a kind of a balance, of an harmony or dance between excitation and inhibition, right? Um,
Absolutely.
and do you think pleasure, what you were saying before, it's actually arise from that tension? Um, for between this yes and no or not yet.
Yeah, I like the not yet, because that's of course what you're always working against, right?
Yeah.
I think there's two kinds of pleasure. And I'm going to liken it to drug states. There's a
Mhm.
pleasure that you get from amphetamine and cocaine. That's a stimulant kind of pleasure. And then there's which drives you toward something. It drives you toward a goal. Then there's a pleasure that you get when you consummate that goal, when you interact with the goal and you get what you want from the goal. And that consummatory pleasure is more like an opioid state, like as if you've taken heroin and you're lying down on a couch. You
Yeah.
smoked opium and you're lying down in an opium den, in Shanghai in 1890, and you're just lying down on this couch in this delicious afterglow. The first pleasure drives you toward things, and the more so think about it going from distal to proximal to interactive. And each of those phases you're driven on, and even more powerfully. And we know that with mesolimbic dopamine, for example, when you see something at a distance, you have the firing of these cells in a phasic way. So they all fire at once, kind of like a general giving a command. Okay, troops charge.
Yeah.
And and I mean the general may die after that, but the troops are just charging because the order was given. So that's kind of a phasic response, right? Which is kind of a one pulse, and it says go after what? That requires, this honing that I was talking about, where you have different neurochemical systems that come into places like the nucleus accumbens or ventral striatum and kind of hone it. So if oxytocin is there as well, you might be honing it toward a partner or toward some social interaction. If other things are there, you may be honing it toward food. If other things are there, you may be honing it toward water or some liquid to quench your thirst. If you're cold, you might be honing it in toward finding shelter that's warm. Whatever it is, it's like you're honing it with these different neurochemicals that are telling you, well, I'm driving now toward a social stimulus. I'm driving now toward a warmth stimulus. I'm driving now toward a. But the closer you get, dopamine starts to fire in a tonic way. And now you're getting even more dopamine, but you're getting also this, the interaction between this motivational system and your motor system. Because at a distance, you just got to move towards something. So you walk, you run, you get in your car,
Yes.
whatever it might be. But once you're interacting with that stimulus, especially if it's a social stimulus and another individual, now you need more fine motor coordination, and you also need better social skills, right? I mean, you can go and just go, hi, and the person is like,
Yeah.
oh, what are you?
What are you?
Get away from me. Or you can go and say, well, hello, my name is Jim. And, and the person might say, oh, well, my name, yeah. And so you get this interaction of motor coordination that goes from more gross motor patterns to more fine motor coordination. Yeah, until you two people,
It's
I
so
don't know, on a
interesting.
first date at a restaurant. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you start to see these synchronous behaviors, right? Where, and, the brain has regions, the cortex in particular, has regions that are responsible for that synchrony, and that's driven by oxytocin. So, she touches her hair, he touches his hair,
Yeah.
right? Or, uh, one potential partner is touching the stem of the wine glass and the other person touches the rim of the wine glass. I mean, whatever it is,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
start to show these synchronous behaviors. And you pick up on that completely subconsciously. Like you're not necessarily consciously aware of it. The awareness might be, oh, I feel close to you, right? Because we're doing the same things. We're doing things in synchrony. So I feel closer to you because I feel that synchrony. Yeah. As opposed
Yes.
to, you know, when it's not synchronous, you're trying to maintain eye contact and I don't know, the guy's scoping around for somebody else to look at. That can be a break in synchrony, which then leads you to the feeling that, you're not getting close to this person. You're failing. You're not,
Yeah.
it's not going to work out. You might as well leave, duck to the bathroom now and leave. It's whatever. So and your brain tags that. Yeah. So in the first case, that is pleasure, but it's an appetitive kind of pleasure.
Okay.
It's like, wow, everything is working. We're in sync. We're showing these synchronous behaviors. My God, everything is really cool. And then finally we touch each other. You the fingers touch, whatever it is, and that's electric. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that pleasure can be glorious, yeah? And when you finally, I mean, probably the most synchronous thing two human beings can do together is have sex.
Mhm.
Maybe feeding each other too, but having sex is certainly a massive amount of synchrony. If
Yes.
you're into each other, then you're not only into your own feelings, but you're into the feelings of the other person, and you're
Mm.
trying to do things, engage. Well, is what I'm doing turning this person on? Is what I'm doing, bringing this person to orgasm or whatever it might be?
Yes.
And once that happens, once orgasms happen,
Mm.
now you're in a different state. You're in this consummatory pleasure state, which is not a driven state, but it's a much more of a like a refractory state. Like you've reached this explosive, apex,
Yes.
and now you're calming down. You have, like when you eat a big meal, once you're done, you're done.
Yeah,
How do
exactly.
you know you're done? Well, I can't eat anymore. It's like, I mean, yeah, you may have consumed, a massive steak, for example, and, you just can't eat another bite of steak. If you do, you think you're going to throw up.
Yeah, it's
But
necessary to stop this phase.
exactement. Except for the fact that when the crème brûlée comes out, then you're like, oh, well,
I might take another one.
I might take another, I can eat another 3,000 calories. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Especially if it's good and you know it's good and it's just perfect and crisp and wonderful. So obviously there's again, a hierarchy there that you can see,
Mm.
that you've consumed enough protein. You don't need any more protein. You actually don't need the creme brulee, but it just caps the meal off perfectly. And then you can't eat anything. But that's cool because it's dinner time and you're not going to eat anything for the next 12 hours when you get home, go to sleep and then wake up in the morning. So you've consumed enough food to guide you through that period of fasting.
Yeah,
Now I know
exactly.
that sounds horrible. Like if I were a restaurant critic, for example, I would say, "Wow, you've reduced this glory of tasting and feeding and eating and drinking down to these rudimentary components." That sounds very clinical, but that's really what those components are.
Mm.
Yeah, and when you study them and you study why, for example, people have like an anhedonia, so they're on a drug that might be reducing dopamine, that might be reducing the opioid activation, and they just don't have the desire for anything,
Yeah, it's natural
So
balance.
they'll eat to live rather than live to eat,
Mm.
if you get my distinction. And we do the same thing with sex. We can, live to have sex, or we can have sex to live, in the sense of, do we just do it as a routine, or do we do it because we're really, really into it?
Yes.
That it's a passion. And that consummatory pleasure always creates the passion. It,
Mm.
it maintains the passion over time, right? So
Yes.
when that begins to go away, you have a problem maintaining desire. You have a problem maintaining passion, right?
Mm.
When that feeling goes away, um, and you'll work harder to get that feeling again, whether it be, having multiple sex partners, whether it will be, going on the internet and masturbating every day. I mean, whatever it is, you're going to be trying to recreate that state,
Yes.
right? And that becomes a real problem because it becomes almost an obsessive compulsive disorder
Completely.
under these
Yes.
circumstances, where you're no longer feeling the consummatory pleasure,
Mm.
and that somehow is massively activating the appetitive behavior to get to that point.
Okay.
Yeah. So these two pleasures are really important. And the consummatory one always reinforces the appetitive one.
Mm.
When it doesn't, then you increase the appetitive behavior to get to that state.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So
You know what
interesting.
I mean? So, here would be an example. When you put money in a machine to get a candy bar,
Hmm.
yeah, and you press the button, and the candy bar kind of comes, and then it almost doesn't. It doesn't fall, right? Now, people are really funny when it comes to that. They get like very much like the rats in my lab, where, they'll push the button more and harder,
Mm.
even though the button is already finished. But they'll push the button again and again and again and again and again and again. And when that doesn't happen, they'll push the machine
Wow.
until finally the candy bar will fall.
All
Yeah.
right.
So here's an example of engaging, you had that desire, it didn't work, right? And now you're increasing the appetitive behavior to get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people will work very hard for these things.
Yeah, and I'm curious. That leads me very naturally to the next question I had, because in some practices like tantric practices or other
Mhm.
kind of practices, the no organs practice is often known. And on your side, I think you written that orgasm like activates opioids, um,
Right.
and this biological pose. And I'm very curious because does that mean that exploring continuous or non-orgasmic pleasure, like in those practices, might involve entirely different brain circuits? Does it go from another way?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think the idea of holding off makes you want more.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, we have an old phrase in English, good food takes time,
Yeah.
which means it's good because you waited for it,
Hmm.
right? It's not, it may not be any better than anything else, but the fact that you have to wait for it makes you want it more.
Hmm.
Yeah. So being in that state and developing sort of an understanding of that state and being mindful and in the moment in that state is part of what tantra does.
Yeah.
And what you're doing essentially is you're really getting into that dopaminergic state, right? The state of wanting and being able to hold off
Yeah.
on the need,
Hmm.
yeah, or on the want, right? Until you have it.
Yeah.
And then when you do, it feels better
Yeah.
because you held off. But the thing is that defines kind of an inverted U-shaped curve, if you think about it.
Hmm.
Yeah, so take a U-shaped curve, turn it around. That's an optimality curve.
Yeah.
There's going to be an optimal amount of time that you wait for something, right? And it's going to be different for different kinds of motivations. But there's an optimal amount of time that you're willing to wait for something.
Hmm.
And everybody's a little bit different with that. And then when you move beyond that optimal time, your motivation decreases
Right.
for it, right? And that, of course, defines, like in drug addiction, that defines withdrawal.
Hmm.
But it also defines a state in which, when you wait too long, people say distance makes the heart grow fonder.
Yeah.
Yeah. But too much distance for too long makes the heart look elsewhere.
Hmm.
And eventually that happens,
Yeah.
right? Where people just say, well, this isn't working. I've waited too long.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I see this in female rats. If they don't get what they want when they want it, when they're in heat, they'll just find another male,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I mean, if he's already ejaculated, the male, because male rats can ejaculate quite a bit. If he's already ejaculated 3 times and he's in kind of a much longer refractory period, she just goes elsewhere,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Incredible. Yeah.
So because she's not willing to wait,
Yeah. Yeah.
at least she's willing to wait a little bit, but not a whole lot.
Hmm.
And I think human beings are driven by the same kind of thing. So tantra kind of has you kind of get into the pocket of that and really develop the feeling and the mindfulness of being in that moment
Exactly.
and
Yes.
understanding that, so that when you actually do engage the consummatory system, like you finally do have sex, like holding off. I mean, orgasm on high arousal
Hmm.
is way better than orgasm on low arousal,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
right? And so it's the same kind of thing. If you can hold off, you're increasing arousal. If you have to wait, you're
Hmm.
increasing arousal. And we see this in, people in long distance relationships.
Yeah.
They may see each other twice a month, but when they do, it's like, the first 24 hours is spent having sex and the rest of it is spent eating and having fun with each other.
Yeah.
But you're not dealing necessarily with the problems that might exist when the two of you finally move in together and then have to deal on a daily basis with one another,
Mm. And
right? Because then things change.
exactly, and uh, it's very interesting because it brings the emotional part. I wanted to speak with you, and I want to bring this emotion part into the picture now. Um, like, for instance, or that stress. or rejection or
Hmm.
shame, we all know that they can block desire.
Hmm.
And from your point of view on a neurobiological level, what's really happening in the brain when someone loses the spark? Is it something you can define?
Well, you've got you're actually asking two questions.
Yeah.
The first is, what does stress do?
Mm. Hmm.
And it's interesting, a little bit of stress can actually, because it's arousing and increases heart rate, can actually kind of potentiate
Hmm.
sex
Yeah.
and potentiate your sexual desire. I mean, Ovid talked about this in his Metamorphoses or his Ars Amatoria, where it's like, you want to get a woman, take her to the games. And then she'll be in such an aroused state watching the gladiators fight that you can redirect that into sexual arousal, right?
Yeah.
And we know that that's actually true, right? You can potentiate, for example, genital blood flow in women in
Mm.
particular if they see a little bit of a horror movie,
Hmm.
right? Or they watch something that is really stressful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, because you're activating genital blood flow, and that's a good thing
Hmm.
because then you're kind of already there. So a little bit of stress can actually go a long way to potentiating things. Um, you might see this as well in people in the BDSM community where, they may have a low level of general arousal,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
but you spank them or you dress up in leather or you cosplay something, and all of a sudden now the arousal goes up
Hmm.
and now they can function in a sexual manner
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Now they can function because the arousal's up. I mean, we need people like this. They're firefighters, they're airline pilots. They're
Mm.
not going to get, the left engine is cut out. They're not, the pilot comes on and is not going, oh my God, the engine cracked that. It's like, well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to get you down now. And, they're maintaining cool under these really horribly stressful circumstances. Firefighters going into a burning building and saving people. I mean, it's the same kind of thing. We need people like that.
Mm.
Yeah. I could never be that because I would be freaking out. But probably most people would. Again, it's an inverted U-shaped curve. But once the stress level goes beyond a critical threshold, and now your life is in danger,
Yeah.
or you fear that it might be, or you have a foreboding anxiety that something bad is going to happen and it's imminent.
Mm.
Yeah. And now what you're doing is you're changing the focus of that mesolimbic dopamine system. And now the focus is on escape
Right.
and on reducing anxiety rather than on increasing arousal for sex. And so those systems end up inhibiting one another.
Hmm.
And that command really comes from your frontal lobe. It comes from the part that we call the executive function part of your cortex, the frontal lobes, which are telling you, okay, you know what? I can put this off until tomorrow, but now I got to escape or I'm going to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not I
Hierarchy
need
again.
to eat or I'm going to die. Now it's like, the the soldiers are coming. I'm going to die,
Yeah.
right? So I have to escape. And I mean, people have done all sorts of horrible things under those circumstances,
Mm.
right? Where, you think about, in terms of the Holocaust, where
Yeah.
babies that were crying needed to be stifled or killed
Yeah.
in order for the rest of the people not to be discovered.
Mm.
And, mothers did that in order to survive and in order to have their other children survive.
Yeah.
And you think of how could anybody do that, but, you're not in the circumstance. When you are, other motivations come to the fore. And it's not a desire to kill, it's a desire to live
Mm.
and to have other people live, right? And so, when that happens, you're not thinking about having sex,
Yeah. I know.
right? Because the
Hierarchy
focus of your
again.
attention, yeah. Well, and again, the focus of your attention is on something else, right? And so you inhibit sex and you now activate fear.
Mm.
And when fear is activated, it's really hard to concentrate on a sexual circumstance or sexual stimulus.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, that's different for different people. What may drive fear in one person might be a little thing, or something not even existing. Like, for example, I can't, if you have agoraphobia, you can't leave the house
Yes.
or something bad will happen to you. So you're safe in the house, you're unsafe outside. And somebody says, well, let's have sex outside. No, it's not going to happen,
Mm.
right? You're going to have to go into the house to do that. So you could easily see how that can, the inhibition, sort of think of it as a seesaw, as a balance. And now it's balanced. It's kind of sinking toward inhibition under these circumstances, which means that excitation is reduced,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Now you can go the other way when you remove the fear.
Yeah.
Now the inhibition has less weight on it.
Hmm.
So excitation can have more weight on it.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Very, very interesting. And you know that you were speaking before about sorry, mindfulness, and
Hmm.
I'm still uh, going into the way of the emotion and connection part of the
Right.
discussion. And you know that lately we hear more and more about mindfulness or conscious
Mhm.
sexuality, uh, and this is linked to what you were saying before, was where someone doesn't have any fear or feels safety or trust, and from a neuroscientific perspective, do you think we can actually retrain our brain to feel more pleasure? Like, for example, slowing down, breathing, or paying attention to sensation.
Oh, sure, sure. I mean, this is kind of what cognitive behavior therapy does, for
Mm.
example.
Hmm.
So you have a fear of spiders, and you think spiders are everywhere in your bedroom, so you can't have sex in the bedroom because there might be a spider. So now you reduce the fear of the spider, and all of a sudden you can be more mindful, not of the spider, but of the other things that are going on,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Like this, like the sexual circumstance, for
Mm.
example. And so now you're free to experience not just the arousal with that, but also the pleasure that comes from being in that aroused state and then having orgasms and being in that kind of consummatory state of satiety, shall we say.
Mm.
um, and it you when you reduce anxiety in particular, you amp sex,
Hmm.
or not just sex, you amp the ability to not be so focused on the anxiety inducing thing or stimulus or circumstance or whatever. You 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 know you can now experience other things
Mm.
instead of being so focused in an obsessive way about your spiders or about whatever it is that you're fearing. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, that's very interesting. And so uh, that leads me to the last question, Jim, before
Hmm.
we close. Um,
Okay.
so, if you had one message for people exploring their own intimacy today, uh, what would it be on your perspective?
Oh, wow. um wow, yeah. I mean, the obvious answer is to just breathe, calm down, and go for it. Yeah. Like don't worry about people worry about too much.
Mm,
They worry about, well, if I do that, then I'm not going to have time to get my work done. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. And, we take time to eat.
yeah.
Why do we not devote time for sex?
Mm,
Or for, some kind of other intimacy? Um, People I know where, sort of the desire has gone out of their relationship now.
yeah.
So what do they do? I mean, people cheat. And then they say, oh, well, I'm doing the same thing I always do, but I'm doing it with a different person. And now I know what love really is, because they're now experiencing the appetitive side again,
Yeah.
right? Which it's odd, because once people move in together, it's almost like the appetitive stuff goes.
Yeah.
Well, because now we live together, so we don't have to like date each other,
Hmm.
because we live together. But people I know who keep that spark
Mm,
do so because they maintain date nights, for
yeah,
example,
exactly.
right? And they don't come home. It's like, if you're lucky enough to have parents, your own parents that are still alive, you send the kids to the grandparents, and
Mm,
your date night ends up in a hotel.
yeah.
It doesn't end up back at home where all, you know, well, we're gonna have sex the same way we always do, and it's Friday night, and it's in the bedroom, and it's not, and sex therapists will say, well, why don't you try having sex in the kitchen? And that's like rocket science to people. How could I do that? Sex in
Yeah,
the kitchen. Like, well, okay, start with a chair. I mean, there's like a million ways to do this.
of course.
So being open to that, I think, and being, and remembering that sex, like good food, like art,
Yes,
is a passionate experience. And when and part of the human condition, which is really strange to me, and yet it is one of these balancing acts. Another balancing act is between wanting predictability, wanting to be able to predict what's going to happen, and getting bored because you can predict what's happening.
of course.
Right? So, right. So it's like if you want things to be predictable because then you can manipulate them and predict them at a distance and to put your foot in the
I just
fire
love
every
that
time in
image.
order to realize it's hot.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then it's like, well, yeah, every time I put my foot in the fire, it gets burned. Now it's predictive and I'm bored. So doing things that are unpredictable. I mean, does an artist paint the same picture every time? No.
No,
They paint a different picture. They have a different feeling that they're trying to express. And feeling that way about sex, I mean, we would never do, to sex what we do to food. I mean, am I going to eat, the same thing every night for 5 nights in a row?
of course not.
No, you're going to get bored by it.
Hmm.
It's like, honey, wake up, let's have some ice cream.
Hmm.
It's like, it's the same goddamn ice cream. I don't want to eat that again.
Yeah.
So you want to have a different flavor. You want something different, And so I think with sex, we tend to sort of habituate
Yeah.
and make it a habit rather than make it a passion.
And it
And
is so
yet when you're
true.
younger, sex is a passion.
Yeah.
So being able to recreate that passion and finding ways of doing that, even when you're living together, could mean, just opening yourself up to play, to creativity, and say, well, we're not going to have sex in the bedroom. Now we're going to do it in the kitchen or the laundry room, or we're going to do it outside the backyard, or we're going to do something different. Or people see this with vacation sex. I mean, they go to a hotel on a beach somewhere,
Yeah.
and now they're having sex exactly the same way as they always do in the same positions.
Yeah.
But lo and behold, it's in a hotel at the beach, and now it's different.
Yeah.
And there's more passion associated with it and hence more pleasure. So I think people just have to remember to be creative and remember to continue to date each other
Oh,
instead of just, boom, go right to sex.
that's a very good ending, and I thank you so much for this deeply human and scientific insight, Jim, and to tell us how pleasure takes form into the brain and the body with this emotional part. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you, Jim. And if this episode moved you, please share it or talk about it, or simply let it resonate into your body just for a while. See you soon, Jim, and thank you for
Okay.
another exploration of intimacy.